Yes, we are ready. We are live as well.
Okay. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a special lecture on migration, migrants, and the right to city, organized by Center for Work and Welfare, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi. I welcome all of you to this special lecture on a very topical issue and very important issue. And we are grateful to have as chair Dr. M. Ramachandran sir and our speaker for this lecture today on migration, migrants, and the right to city. Very distinguished speaker, Professor R.B. Bhagat. I will briefly introduce the chair and speaker, and then we will start the lecture. Our chair for this today's event is Dr. M. Ramachandran. Dr. M. Ramachandran sir is a retired IS officer of the 1972 batch, served state and central government in India for 38 years before retiring in 2010. He rose to be the Chief Secretary of Uttarakhand and was Secretary in the Ministry of Urban Development, Government of India, for close to 4 years. Post-retirement, he continues to be active in urban sector and governance area. He is associated with various national level endeavors in the capacity of chairperson of the Indian Heritage Cities Network Foundation, chairman of the National Urban Transport Awards Committee, chancellor of a university, and senior advisor to the Green Building Council. Dr. M. Ramachandran has a master's degree in economics, MPhil in economic planning, and PhD on project planning. Dr. Ramachandran has been a constant support for us at the Impact and Policy Research Institute and mentors us with his vast experience for important policy research and its impact to the society overall. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Our speaker for today's lecture, very distinguished Professor R.B. Bhagat. Professor R.B. Bhagat is a professor and also head of the Department of Migration and Urban Studies at the International Institute of Population Studies, IIPS, in Mumbai, Maharashtra. Professor Bhagat holds a master's degree in geography from the Center for the Study of Regional Development, CSRD, in Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and a PhD in demography from University of Bombay. He was also a recipient of UGC Research Award during 2002 and 3. Professor Bhagat was actively associated with working groups on urbanization set up by International Union for the Scientific Study of Population, IUSSP, Paris. He was also a member of IUSSP Committee on Demography of Armed Conflict during 2006-9. Professor Bhagat is currently working with UNESCO, UNICEF, India Migration Initiative as a resource person and prepared a policy paper on migrants' right to the city. Professor Bhagat was also coordinator of the Environmental Information System, ENVIS, on population, settlement, and environment at IIPS, funded by the Ministry of Environment and Forest, Government of India, and also a coordinator of the concurrent evaluation of the National Rural Health Mission, NRHM, funded by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. Professor Bhagat has worked as an expert in various projects related to Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs, Ministry of Human Resources, in Government of India. He also worked as a consultant to UNESCO, UNICEF, India Initiative on Migration, International Organization of Migration, IUM, UN Population Division, EC Mode, Kathmandu. He has been teaching postgraduate students and guiding MPhil and PhD scholars. Professor Bhagat is an authority on the themes of urbanization and right to the city, migration and development, demography of religion, caste, politics of demographic data, spatial analysis, economic geography, the intersection of sociology, economics, and the whole development process. Professor Bhagat also specialization in poor population and demographic related issues such as fertility, population growth, marriage, and so on. Professor Bhagat has also keen interest cutting across this intersection of issues with environment and climate change. Thank you so much. Now I will invite our chair today to make remark on the topic uh, uh, and also formally start the event, and then invite Professor R.V. Bhagat to start his lecture. Dr. M. Ramachandran, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Arjun. Thank you for the introduction. This is a topic of critical interest in today's circumstances. Migration. Can cities exist without migration? Can cities exist without migrants? Will migration continue to happen at the same pace, or will the level of migration come down as we reach certain levels of development, or particularly cities' growth and development? What has come out in the recent times is how migrants got treated, if I could put it like that. We have an eminent speaker, so I don't want to preempt or even make an attempt to preempt what all figures and details he'll be providing. But one generally got a feeling that the large number of migrants who were sustaining the economy, city economies, more so the big city economies, the mega city and the larger cities economy, they probably got a incorrect treatment during the recent process of when the virus started creating problems. There was lockdown, sudden lockdown, and they had to decide what to do next. I have been repeating this. Did the employers treat them properly at that critical stage or not? There are some cities where probably they were provided with food, but their basic desire was to get back to their families. And I think that's a basic human desire to get back. But in that entire process, did they get the right treatment in the city in which they were living, working? That also leads us to another aspect of the question as to what living conditions do they have in these big cities, particularly cities like Mumbai, where getting a proper accommodation itself is an issue. I was told recently by someone who visited Surat that the migrant workers who have come to Surat, they have an arrangement, good many of them have an arrangement where, say, morning till evening, one person lives in the room, and in the evening when he goes for work, the other person comes back and makes use of that accommodation. That's the type of adjustment they make in a big city just to continue to exist. The security, social security schemes, how effective they are, how functional they are, and in situations like this, when everyone is, of course, facing a crisis, what is the relief or recourse people like that have? Can we have a system whereby migrants' movement into the city can get recorded in the sense that one will have enough data as to what number of people, where, in what type of activities are engaged and involved, so that when a decision making has to happen, there is some base for that decision making. Now, this could always be interpreted as attack on privacy and things like that. And especially now with initiatives like what UP has done to have some sort of a data bank, I don't know whether it's really going to work well. And also the question is, can cities, their enterprises, their employers make do without their presence? There are always reports that, already reports that migrants have started coming back. Probably they have to earn a living. One has to also ask the question, if they decide to stay back in their villages, will they have enough opportunities of working? Will it lead to rise in their life and in their activities? These are some of the questions, I think, which keep bothering anyone who is reading about this, who is interacting with cities, and who is trying to understand the politics, if I may put it, or the economics, if I may put it, of a city, as to where do they figure, what importance do they have, how do the others treat them, what recourse to some sort of relief in times of difficulty do they have, and what is the nature of the skill which many of them or most of them have, how can that be put to better use? The informal sector, how does it continue to exist? Very recently, the government announced some sort of a housing scheme. To what extent it will work, one has to see. Rental housing really has not worked in a great manner in our country. I know of cities where rental housing was provided, but it becomes permanent residence of people. So these are all some of the thoughts which come to one's mind. So without taking more time, I think I could request Professor Bhagat to give his lecture, talk on the topic, and which I'm sure will lead to, I hope, not more questions, but it will provide more answers. Over to you, Professor Bhagat.
Thank you, Chair, Dr. Ramchandran, former Secretary Urban Development. I think is the right person to chair this session with a lot of experience. Dr. Arjun Kumar, Director of IMPRI, Professor Bharat Singh, Dr. Bhaswati Das, Dr. Kunal Kesari, and Vidya Jadhav, and participants. So it is my pleasure to be here and to deliberate on the issue of migration and migrant in relation to this city. All of you have seen what has happened in the month of April and May, that all of a sudden millions of people have started moving out of the city and going to the rural area. And it has really shaken the conscience of the country, nation. And migration has all of a sudden has come to the center stage of national discourse, policy making, and also a lot of with renewed academic interest. So my concern here will be, we know the problem. Migrants have not been treated well in this time of the epidemic. We also have seen that whether they are citizen or not the citizen of this country, because there were a lot of issues that whether they belong to a state of origin or they belong to a state of destination, or it is the responsibility of central government. We have seen a lot of things, debates, and ultimately Supreme Court has to intervene. So we know the problem. Why this problem? That is my concern of today. Why this problem and how we can academically, theoretically understand this problem and locate the relationship between migrants, migration, and city. So this is what I shall be doing in the next 30 to 35 minutes. So if you look at the title I have proposed, in the title itself, I have mentioned migration and migrant, two separate words, two separate terms. And conceptually, it is necessary to distinguish between migration and migrants because it has implication in policy making. So when I talk about migration and we look at our constitution, so right to move is the fundamental right under Article 19 of the Constitution. So there is no question of debating on migration. It is an inalienable right of the citizen of this country. The question comes about the migrants. What are the migrants' rights? How migrants are treated? What happens to the migrant? There the policy comes into. So whatever policy need to be formulated, although we have very little policy on migrants, and now some of the things are coming up, policy should not be on migration, but it should focus on migrant. Both are related things. Migrant is a person who makes the move, and that is the migration. But a person can make many moves, many migration in his or her lifetime. So this is one thing I emphasize in the beginning. The second thing I would like to emphasize is that when anybody is talking about migration, there are two types of migration. One is the voluntary migration and other is the forced migration. Today's talk is not about forced migration. It is about voluntary migration. So what is voluntary migration? Migration by choice. It is not something, not trafficking. It is not displacement. It is not refusing. So that is very different types of migration, forced migration. But there is something other, the distress migration people use. But in distress migration, how we define, how we look at, but if there is a consent and voluntary action, then it must be constituted as voluntary migration, and larger portion of the migration in the city are the voluntary migration. So this is a distinction, because voluntary migration and again forced migration has two different implications. Voluntary migration is related with development enhancing, is freedom enhancing, whereas forced migration is bondage creating, subjugation, exploitation, etc. So this is the two distinctions. The next is the city, how we understand city. City is virtually a relationship between people and place. People are making the place, changing the place, and when place changes in terms of concentration of economic activities and concentration of people, we categorize some space as some place as urban, and within urban some place as city. So basically, the city is a form of relationship between place and people. People is very necessary part of the city. But what is happening during last few decades? There is a disconnect between people and place. So entire city is becoming space. So there is another concept. We are not talking about, we are not seeing what is happening in city. It is not becoming a place where people are connected with place, but it is becoming a space which is produced and which is some sort of concrete form, some sort of built form, and it becomes some sort of a commodity or a consumption. So this is how city has changed from place to space, and therefore this question arises that right to the city, that now people has been disconnected with place, how to restore people with place. So right to the city is something about urban imagination, something about how we can make city, how we can remake city, how it could be inclusive city, a sustainable city. So these are some of the things, theoretical things, that I would like to put before you, connecting city with development process, political process, and what is happening in relation to migration and labor within the city. So this is what I like to unfold my talk further. So if you look at the role of the city or urbanization, it has very historically, it has been very good in the past. It has a very bright role, and we know Indus Valley civilization was an urban civilization. We have Greek city-states, where city was central in the political process. In our country also, we have from the 6th century BC, around 6th to 5th century BC, we have Janapadas. Some of the Janapadas were Ganasangha, Ganaraj, and cities were very central. Although the form of cities were different. The process of city formation was different because technology and other things were, economy were in a different stage. But by and large, the characteristics were the same. So when we look at city, Greek city-state, in the Greek city-state, there were three groups of people. One were the citizen, other were the matics. Matics means migrant, and then slaves. These three groups were there. Citizens have only the right to make the political decision. And when we look at the how the word city, and city is related with citizenship, civilization. So all these are have a common origin in Latin word. And if you look at the Greek word, what is the Greek word for city? Greek word for city is polis. And for citizen, it is polites. and for polity, it is politia. So there is a connection how cities played very important role in development of political organization in the past. Now cities have acquired importance not in the ancient time, but also in medieval times, and cities where forts were there, palaces were there, where bazaars were held, and as gradually economic evolution took place, we find that it is now in the phase of industrialization. Cities have got a very different connection with industrialization. It has got different forms. So our discussion actually, basically, we want to understand what is happening to the city since the Industrial Revolution, or since the industrialization began in our process of economic development. So our role model is the Western European countries. What has happened to the cities of West European country, how cities have evolved there, what has happened there, and how things are developing in developing countries and India. It is not in similar way. There are a lot of contrast, trajectories are different, but something to understand what has happened to the cities or the role of urbanization in the West European countries in the aftermath of industrialization. So when industrialization took place in the middle of the 18th century, there was massive rural to urban migration in Europe. Not only there was massive rural to urban migration, but these countries, these European countries, and particularly Great Britain, they have also got the opportunity of emigration, going outside of the country. And at any point of time, 20 to 25% of the British people were living outside Great Britain. So they have huge opportunity of emigration, rural to urban migration. Now this to be looked into, that when rural to urban migration took place in 18th century, 19th century, early 20th century, now rural area has completely formed differently. It has disappeared. There is no agrarian distress like our country we are now looking at here, the agrarian distress, because rural to urban migration is not able to transfer the labor of the rural area to urban area, and villages are also growing demographically. So this is the situation where we compare, when we compare with European countries, West European countries, and India or developing countries. In this context, cities and economic development in India or in developing countries, providing certain growth impulses, certain growth factor conducive for the growth. And this growth coming from city, again, to be understood in terms of agglomeration economy. Why investment is conducive in urban area, in cities? Because returns are high, it provides urban agglomeration economies, and due to urban agglomeration economies, production efficiency and production cost is low. So what is this urban agglomeration economies? This comes through concentration of economic activity. Now we have more and more firms are getting concentrated. We have skilled manpower available. We have transportation available. We have banking facility available, credit facility available. So this is what it becomes conducive for growth, and then whole process of economic development process in the context of industrialization, it is starting or happening in the cities, and particularly it is happening more and more bigger cities. And cities are becoming bigger and bigger because they have more concentration of everything, economic activities, people, capital, etc. So now bigger the size, better it is. This is our sometimes misunderstanding. And this is an economic fact that sometimes a city is becoming larger. But empirically, bigger cities are better city economically, I'm telling you. I will also come to the problem of the city, but I'm now trying to tell what are the something advantages of the city, or what are the positive sides of the city, and what are the negative side, and why we should raise the question of right to the city. So bigger the city, better in terms of economic opportunity, in terms of economic growth, rising per capita income, etc. on an average. Now, empirical studies show that when city size doubles, 50% per capita income increases. So this is an empirical fact. Now, with this economic growth in the city, there is a bound to have migration. And we find that hardly any city, there is an example of any city which has not grown due to migration. And therefore, cities are product of migration. And when migration takes place, there will be diversity in the city. A lot of people coming from diverse background. But again, it is linked with economically. When economic development takes place, also economic diversification takes place. It is not the one type of occupation. It is the variety of occupation that takes place when economic development, agglomeration economy consolidates. Then with economic growth in the city, we have economic diversification, we have occupational diversification, and then migration pitches into. So we have demographic as well as social, cultural, religious diversity. Therefore, this is another important thing of city. The city cannot be looked without diversity. City is an area where diversity is there, and this diversity is a strength, and this diversity needs to be politically managed, how political process manages. That is important for economic growth. Now, related with this diversity is the innovation, is a creativity and innovation. Cities are places of creativity and innovation. And these creativity and innovations are related with diversity. So if you suppose you want to have a homogeneous city, that is not possible, but in a homogeneous city, creativity and innovations will disappear. This is what is the historical experience of economic growth, creativity, innovation, etc. So these are some of the things which are the positive sides of the city, and it shows how it has shaped our political, economic, and social system historically in different phases of history. But then cities have a lot of problems. Why there is an inequality in city? Why there is a poverty in city? Why there is a slum in city? And of course, why environmental degradation? That is, I think, the biggest. Most of the environmental degradation, the city plays important role within the city or outside the city, because city demands the resources. So these are the bigger issue. If cities have so much good things, how come cities harbor so negative, so bad things? So this is to be discussed, and there are certain explanations. And therefore, this right to the city comes into the picture, that yes, there are people who have made the city, but they are not these people who are able to enjoy the fruits of the city. So right to the city means who participates in the city, who are included in the city, who owns the city, and who controls the city. So this is what. So The right to the city has been proposed by Henri Lefebvre, a French sociologist, and he has written a book in 1968, and that book was titled in French, and the book was called Le Detroit et la Ville, right to the city. In English, we can translate this one. So in the time of, during the 1968, 67, 68, there was some uprising, student uprising in Paris, and there was also workers' protest. And during that time, he wrote this one. So what he was trying to say, that again, what I made the point in the beginning, the relationship between people and place has been disconnected, and space comes into the picture. Space, that the commodity, city has become a commodity. The use value has become exchange value. So this commodification of the space has come at a particular juncture of history, where cities are not only the place of consumption, but it is the consumption of the places. What we are consuming is the city, not the products in the city. So that is what happening, and people getting alienated. So this is why the basic thing why right to the city should be restored, and right to the city means participating in the city, in the decision making of the city, and in the making and remaking of the city. It is still, this concept has been further developed and elaborated by David Harvey. David Harvey says that yes, city generates capital, city generates surplus, city generates wealth, and that is good thing. But how this surplus and capital is again leading to capital accumulation and no benefit to the poor, no benefit to the people who are marginalized, migrant. So what is happening within the city, that city is moving, the capital is moving from one circuit to another. This is very interesting proposition made by David Harvey, and this seems to be very realistic, that why we have transition from industrial society or industrial economy to now we have some economy which is based on post-industrial. Now what happened? Why industries? Industries, because capital was there within manufacturing, but within manufacturing, capital is no longer profitable. So now capital moves from this manufacturing to the built environment. Now this is very important thing. So cities, what is happening? City is nothing but built environment, construction. And real estate becoming more and more profitable. And it is an area for wealth creation, not only wealth creation, hiding of the wealth also, the black money, hiding of the wealth, the black money also. And who creates this built environment? The construction worker. And among the migrant worker, 40% workers are construction workers. And that is, I think, big chunk. So this is what happening within the city. City is moving from the product manufacturing to the built environment. And now also something also happening more in the city, that is the speculative market, stock market, credit market, capital market. And in this market, money creates money, no product. And when money creates money and there is no product, goods and services, we see some financial crisis, big financial crisis. But financial crises are not explained in terms of what is happening in the city. So I think we need to see that what is happening within the city and the city relationship of city and people and capital, and how to restore then this to the people. I think that is where the migration comes into the picture. And migration, when we look at the migration, then all these people are now in the informal sector. So informality is has become basic feature. Along with informality means there is no social security. There is no job contract. And very type of temporary, anytime anybody can be fired or anybody can lose the job. With informality comes invisibility. Invisible. That's why when migrants came on the road, they are visible. When migrants were not on the road, they were not visible. So informality, invisibility, insignificant. They were insignificant. They didn't matter. So these are basically some of the things happening with migration, migrant labor and creation of built environment. The urbanization, which is creating built environment and creating a certain source of capital accumulation without producing goods and services. And this is, I think, really challenge for the economic growth or the political system. And therefore, how to restore city to the people. Right to the city is not an individual right. Right to the city is not an individual right. It is a collective right to how to make our city, how to have urbanization, which is inclusive, which is sustainable, and which is regionally balanced. And one more point connected with built environment. It is the built environment which is creating the destruction of the environment. How environment getting now a lot of climate change and other things we now here, and environmental destruction comes from the increasing of the built environment. But this dynamics is sometimes we understand very differently in policy planning. There is some regulation is there. It is called urban sprawl. So encroachment, etc., in the policy making. But one need to go into the deeper aspects of the economic operation, economic functioning of the city, how city is working. Therefore, some of the political reforms in this country are very good, and that should be strengthened, and that has not happened. And that is 74th Amendment to the Constitution, 73rd Amendment to the Constitution, where it is talked there should be local democracy. And therefore, right to the city also raises a question: who owns the city? City is owned by whom? Mumbai, Delhi. We see multiple agencies, multiple governments owning the city. City doesn't belong to the people. And the local democracy is not flourishing. And when we look at New York or London, the local democracy, mayor is visible whenever there is a problem. And we see it's completely silence. Who is the mayor, or what is the role of the mayor or corporators, and what is happening to the local democracy, how they are connected with people. All these, I think this is a question of decentralization also. So these reforms are there, thinking is there, it needs to be strengthened. Then right to the city is not only for those who are within the city, but also those who are outside the city. And therefore the question is important, that how urbanization can be helpful for rural development. Till now, we don't see connects. There is a rural-urban divide. Either we talk about rural development or urban development, but not the integrated way of rural and urban development, but we don't see the connection. And it is not happening also, because the cities have been siphoning the resources, capital and manpower, etc., siphoning the resources from the rural area. And there is a backwash effect is stronger than trickle down. So although economists argue there will be trickle down, but we don't see trickle down. But there is a more and more backwash effect. The rural-urban gap is increasing, and also inter-state disparity is increasing. Why interstate disparity is increasing? Because you see where are the bigger cities, where are the million-plus city, mega cities are located. Most of the mega cities are located in Western India, Northern India, and vast area is devoid of that. And these cities is working as the engines of economic development, and it is not helping in the rural development. So that's, I think, this connection right to the city also means that those who are not part of the city, those who are in rural area, what is their right? And this right to the city is about the urban imagination. They should also get urban amenities. And therefore, the programs of the government, two important programs I like to highlight. One is the Pura, providing urban amenities to the rural area, which our former President Abdul Kalam has envisioned. And later on, it became Suburban Mission. Now it is called Syama Prasad Mukherjee Urban Mission. Now, these missions actually can create a planned urbanization in rural areas. So the point is that urbanization is not a bad thing, but it has created a city which is not humanizing, which is not inclusive. And therefore, we have to create a different type of city, a different type of urbanization where it can be inclusive, it can be sustainable, and it can promote rural development. So people of rural area need not have to migrate to the city, but city will go to the rural area. And therefore, this is a wider, a bigger thinking or a strategy of rural development. It should be, I think, this is an approach of place and space in understanding our policy and program. But unfortunately, space and place figures very little in our policy and program. We go by beneficiary approach. We go by household approach, as if household and beneficiary is not connected with space and place. And therefore, most of the policies are not benefiting rural people. For example, MSME. Now government has come out with a big program for the MSME. But whether MSME is going to be in rural area, unless there is a rural infrastructure envisioned in terms of Pura or urban mission. So integration of rural mission, urban mission, or concept like Pura with MSME, with Manrega, I think this type of requires a very good planning, a good strategy of planned urbanization of the rural area and meeting the needs and requirements of the right to the city. So right to the city is a larger perspective. It is a theoretical framework of understanding of our development process from the instrument of space and place. And I think that is very critical role we should recognize, and that can provide a type of respect and inclusion to the migrant worker. The type of humiliation that the migrant workers have seen, I think it will remain in the memory of the nation very long time. There is urgent need to avert this type of situation and restore them as citizens of the country, not in terms of formal citizen, but in terms of substantive citizenship, where their political rights, where their social rights and their economic rights are protected. I think I will end here, and if there are questions, we can discuss further, or discussion can throw some light on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I would now invite our chair, Dr. M. Ramachandran sir, to make his remark, and then we will invite discussion to have brief comments and shed some light on the lecture. Sir, your mic.
You can hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Bhagat. You have taken us through what it is and what it has to be, and ultimately you have landed us somewhere where probably the entire policy making and the development process has to undergo a thorough change, total change. I wonder, since I've seen this process for quite a number of years, I wonder whether we are in that direction. One of the deputy chairman of the Planning Commission early days used to talk about the silo approach which we have. So if we have a Ministry of Rural Development, that will deal with certain rural issues. If you have a Ministry of Urban Development, they are supposed to be dealing with urban issues. MSME, there is a separate ministry, they will deal with those issues. We really haven't established a mechanism whereby we can cut across this and bring the players together. And that's the unfortunate fact of our governance today, so to say. And it starts with the political scheme of things where we have ministers, ministries, all truncated. And though there is what is called interministerial consultation when policies are formulated, I don't think it is working to the extent which you have outlined. So thank you for taking us through this entire process. And if there was nothing else, and if I was listening to you only, I would have totally sailed along with you saying that, yes, this is how it should be. But the reality, as you also appreciate, it's not like that. As you rightly said, the city itself is not in total command of its own affairs, its own future. It flows from somewhere, it comes from somewhere, the dependencies are left. So probably dependencies are so structured and left that the city cannot be on its own. Though we look at some of the global examples, I mean, I was just reading, even in the current context, Corona context, the mayor of Greater London has a grievance that he was not fully in command as far as the Greater London area is concerned because there were directions, instructions flowing from above. Probably in a pandemic situation like this, whether it was possible the other way, it's a question. We keep asking this question as far as our Indian cities and towns and local bodies are concerned. Are they anywhere in the scheme of things? The ultimate example being that of Mumbai, which I quite often like to refer to, where the system seemed to have failed at a certain level and at a certain point in time. We have been spending so much on the social sector, health and education, but then when it comes to the people's requirement in a situation like this, the basics are really not available closer to one's place of residence or from where one would immediately like to get some support. So ultimately, there is a rethinking required as far as the process of planning is concerned. And ideally, as you rightly said, if cities and the rural areas work in tandem, nothing like it. But probably that again is a dream which probably may happen at some point in time. I've been wondering whether, as you are narrating, whether manufacturing activities can be closer to the villages. What is required for the cities and towns can be provided from the villages. There is some effort. I think some of these concepts which we are hearing about, whether it is Atmanirbhar Bharat or self-dependence or promoting the rural areas, all that is in that direction. But then at some stage, I think the economies of scale also come into play. That's why it's not really happening to that extent. So without prolonging, if I may ask you for comments on a couple of these points, which somewhere you would have touched upon. City planning and management. I have my own point. As I said, the planning and management is not virtually in the hands of the city itself. But in whatever form it is being done today, does it totally ignore the migrants as a class or as a section of society in the city? Is there something which can be done to improve that situation in the short run? I mean, I'm not talking of a fundamental change which should happen in the long run as you advocated. But is there something more which can happen? Whether we look at the master plan, whether we look at the housing situation, whether we look at the activities within the city and the recent situation, wherever we look at, as you rightly said, and I like that comparison you gave of early days, the citizen, the migrants and the slaves. So does it also mean some sort of a mindset issue as far as the city governing system is concerned? One is the elected lot, the other is the bureaucracy in the civil service. Is there something fundamentally lacking? And if you would like to combine these two questions and comment on what is that is possible in the case of our cities, also keeping in mind that Mumbai is one extreme, but a small town like I don't know, Rishikesh or Tiruchirappalli, they would act and perform differently because their canvas for action is much more limited. Mumbai at least has the resources which probably it generates and it keeps getting. They can think in terms of doing. But still, I have a fundamental question about Mumbai. With all these years, with all these housing programs, what is it which prevented Mumbai from providing for housing to proper housing to all the slum dwellers. It could easily have been done. And at one stage, you were talking about who runs the city. I have this viewpoint. Mumbai is more than 50% slum dwellers. So Mumbai ideally should be governed by the representatives of the slum dwellers, but it'll never happen. So I've combined these 2 points for you for a quick response. Before
Yes.
I have another set of 2 points, which I'll raise after you have addressed this point.
Yes.
Over to you.
So, thank you, Dr. Ramachandran. I think this is a very important point, and you have told from your experience. And this is true that there is a first is mindset problem. We are not open to migrants. We are taking work from them, but when it is comes to giving, then we are not very open-hearted. And sometimes we are long-term migrants are doing against the temporary migrants. So within the city, everybody is migrant, but who is native? Natives are also the migrant, long-term migrants, but they don't have open heart. For these temporary migrants who are moving from rural area and living for 6 months or 1 year, working and going back. So this is one mindset. Second is that then our planners and the policy makers also do not bring the migration issues, perhaps because there is no political support. So you may be more aware, and my reading shows that I don't find the word migrants in document, only that how to prevent migration. Only that cities are growing due to migration, how to prevent migration, and there is a Manrega which will prevent migration. But that's all, whole planning process stops at that. But now we see some changes. Now government has announced rental housing just 1 month back. Now this is very good change. Why this type of change has not come earlier? That yes, migrant cannot own house. They have problem in showing residential proof. If you give rental housing, they can immediately show the residential proof, and then their names will be included in several places. The social security program, there will be no problem of identity and this residential proof. So you are right. I think we have begun, but whether this will be consolidated, this will be sustainable. So this needs to be awareness, and then civil society should come and pressurize the government. And that's why the right to the city becomes the important of rallying point of the citizens. That see, these are the people we have taken work. They are the city makers. They have made the city, but what we are giving them. So that's, I think, I agree with you. And then planning process has completely gone. Now we have projects, and one project is not connected with other project. So master plans are there in just on paper, and many cities don't have master plan. Bombay and Delhi, and in Mumbai also, if you see, master plans are coming a decade after. And now we are will be exhausting the master plan 2034. Now we are 2020. Master plan was approved just few years back. So what is the use of the master plan? So these things are, and I agree with you, your comments very well. So these are my addition to what you said.
Thank you for the clarification. One more set of points on which you would like to comment.
Yes.
In the opening statement, I made a reference to the absence of data with regard to whom we call migrants. As you rightly said,
Yes.
I am also a migrant in the city. I am not a resident of the city, but
Yes.
I don't look at myself as a migrant, or others do not look at me as a migrant. So there is
Yes.
also a classification there. So
Yes.
is there something more which can be done about generating data? And if you have some form of data, will it make a difference as far as the process of planning for the city is concerned? That would become very, very fundamental. And I have my thoughts. You would have read, I advocate these days that if the area sabha concept, that is the polling booth level as the lowest body in the urban hierarchy and scheme of things, if that had become active, generation of data would have been much, much more easier. Sitting here where I'm sitting, I keep thinking, if in this area of 1,000 people, if there is an idea as to who are the ones who keep coming in and going out every day, who are the senior citizens, who are the differently able people who require some help, who are the workers who come, work and go in case they are somewhere in this area. Do we have some idea as to who are these people? X has come from Bihar, Y has come from UP, and they are living here with family, without family. and they are dependent only on this source of income. If there is some sort of data available at the area level, which is a unit,
Yes.
even if it's not an elected entity, I would say it could be an official entity. That information could have flowed to the city level, and probably at the city level, looking at these problems, issues would have been little bit more different and easier. And when we plan for schemes and programs, probably that could make a difference. Would you see any relevance for that, or can that be
Yes.
attempted in a certain period of time? And the related question is, that would be the last question I'll be posing to you. There are discussion waiting. Are there any good global examples of migrants having been treated in a better manner? Any cities or any country where they have been treated differently, and in the process they felt that they are part of the city? And
Yes.
I would supplement that question by saying that as this process keeps going on, like we see in the West, it's difficult to find a plumber. We have to learn to do things ourselves. It's difficult to find a mason or even a carpenter. We have to learn to do those things, drilling and things like that. I find people doing it themselves because, one, it is very expensive. Two, it is difficult to find because in those westernized cities, probably this type of migration is much, much less. And that's probably what the future is going to be. Are we in that direction, if not today, in the coming years? And will it force the original migrants like me to learn more, to work with hand? And would it also mean displacing those migrants who would in the normal course be coming, in the sense that they will have better opportunities from where they are coming from? So I've clubbed a couple of points. To the best you can respond. Over to you.
So regarding data, I think it's a very important, and the way you suggested, that is, I think, right way of doing at a ward level, polling station and ward and corporator should be made responsible. And here I have seen in Navi Mumbai corporation, some of the corporators were very good in helping the migrants. They were distributing rations during this COVID time, because they know. I asked how they know everybody who is migrant, who is living in which chawl, in which building. And so this connection between the corporators, the local representative and migrants or a citizen, I think that is how the ward committee, ward level should function. And this is where the decentralized democracy, decentralized governance comes into the picture. And when they were doing all these things, they will have data. Naturally, who is coming from where, what is their place of birth or place of residence, what language they speak. Because language becoming important for educating the children. If migrant coming from other state, the language requirement, the school requirement, the teacher requirement, various things. So there are a lot of issues of inclusion, and that is, I think, the right way of decentralization and inclusion. At a national level, what is happening? Now, National Sample Survey is not publishing data on migrants. The last data that, if you ask me any data, I will quote 2007, 2008. After that, National Sample Survey has not published data. So if data is not there, how we academician can say something empirically and our student can do research? So there are isolated studies. Some researchers are doing in some pockets and etc. There is a national picture is missing. Census of India gave data on migration after 8 years. 2011, they collected data. Data was released 2019. And even you will be surprised to know, 2 tables have not been published. Industrial classification of migrant worker and occupational classification of migrant worker are not published by Census of India today, 2020, when they were supposed to have another census. So that is my response. Yes, good examples. Right to the City has taken very strong roots in Latin American countries, where this inclusion in housing, education of the children, and various ways of their representation. We have also seen then during COVID time, some of the states, some of the country, like Malaysia or some other European countries, they relax. They will not ask who is illegal migrant or who is a refugee. No, everybody should get the treatment. Come and get the treatment for the COVID. So this type of inclusion is there, but problem is that the problem of consolidation. Something is coming and then it is getting disappearing. So that's why because these migrants are not a vote bank. And I forgot to tell you one thing, that when during the industrial phase or industrial economy or industrial society, proletariat, the working class was strong because they have trade unions. And the trade unions advanced their rights of wages and their parity and etc., social security, etc. Migrant workers have become precariats. They don't have union. So anybody can do anything. And our legal system is not working. For example, we have Interstate Migrant Workmen Act, but nobody is registering. There is no contractor registered. So they are not getting benefit under Interstate Migrant Workmen Act. We have construction, we have building and other construction workers welfare act. And under that act, there are welfare boards. They collected cess from each building. Thousands of crore is there.
Right.
But the benefits are not passed to construction worker who are majority migrant worker because they are not registered. So these things are, I think, there are needs to be systematic development. System should be developed.
Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Arjun.
Thank you so much, sir. So many important points raised by our chair and answered by Bhagat sir. Now I would invite our first discussant, Professor Bhaswati Das ma'am. Ma'am, if you can turn on the camera. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Let me introduce ma'am. Professor Bhaswati Das is Associate Professor at Center for the Study of Regional Development, CSRD, at the School of Social Sciences in Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Ma'am, kindly make your remarks.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Bhagat. It is always enriching for me to listen to you. So many times I have heard, but every time I get new insight to look into the city and migration. And for me, again, it is brushing up of how the concept of citizenship has emerged and how the cities are working today. And from the ancient time, then the Industrial Revolution, then the modern and postmodern cities, including what is happening in most of the developing countries. India's case is really unique, like other developing countries, where we have a little bit of imbalance between the cities. Class 1 cities are more accumulating the resource, and whereas the class 4, 5, 6 cities are almost they guess to get resource and create resource and to maintain their status as cities. Many a time they declassify themselves as rural areas and again come back in next census to be a city. And it is very importantly, you have mentioned that informality, invisibility and insignificance of the migrant worker, because more and more, lastly, in response to Dr. M. Ramachandran, actually that was my query, but you have clarified that the insignificant and invisible, they are more becoming because the breaking up of the trade union movement. When they were more union kind of thing, they established their right and this thing. They could maintain some of their right, which they are now losing. And when we talk about right to city, my observation is that you have just touched upon that. And I would like to add little more, that when we talk about right to city, you rightly have said that it also includes the right to the rural population also, because most of the cities, whatever city produces goods and services, neither the city nor the rural areas are independent of each other. They are strongly dependent. So right to city, when one right is ensured, definitely right to rural areas also, right to the villages also will have to be ensured. Because what if we take the example of Delhi, every year there is a fight. This time, luckily, all the industrial activities are closed. That's why we did not face this kajia. But every year there is a problem of water sharing with Haryana, whether the water will go to sustain the city or whether the water will go for the agricultural activities. So one thing is extremely dependent on the another thing. While taking this, I will not take much of the time. While taking this, when I'm saying that they are, and of course, when we talk about the environment, it is there is another level of fight goes with the UP government and Delhi government, that Delhi pollutes Yamuna, and then when it reaches to Agra and other things, citizens suffers because their major source of drinking water is from the Yamuna river. So one thing is extremely linked with another city also. City itself has a niche. City has niche with other urban centers. City has niche with the rural hinterland in and around that. While taking this thing, you all of course have mentioned by mentioning Pura and other thing. I have just elaborated on that. My two queries, rather, it is not direct question on your lecture, my two queries, that why most of the third world countries, especially those who have been colonized, have faced that some cities grow out of proportion. Sometimes in geographical term, we may call it that, though it is a conceptual issue, that they are growing beyond the carrying capacity of the city. What are the kind of, it is the homogeneous plan and program which is covering all the cities, but why some grow out of proportion? Take example of Delhi or Mumbai, whereas others are unable to grow to that extent. And second question that is coming, because during this lockdown period, I am reading more of Tagore, Gandhi, those kind of literature, which otherwise I do not get much time. And there I was reading an essay written by Rabindranath Tagore on education system. He has several, but one which I liked, where he said that education does not need a city environment. That of course he was his experience with establishment of Vishwabharati, where he said education really does not need the urban environment. Urban is for some other purpose, administrative and some other production system. So education should be kept away from urban environment, and that of course his attention was that to impart more education which is attaching the student to understand the nature, understand the other students from other societies who are coming. So it has to be essentially residential, as well as it has to be essentially out of cities. Now, in this kind of situation, what we are going through in COVID kind, what I was looking into, like my university is entirely, it is residential, it is entirely mostly by the migrant students. Delhi University, it is mostly by the migrant students, and students are worst sufferer in this disconnection process. So now I relate to my question, that why some of these activities even are not decentralized when we are doing the city planning. Why all the activities are coming except agriculture, everything is coming into the city. Those are two of my queries. If you can enlighten us on this. One is why some cities go out of proportion, remain in the same kind of program and policies, and another is why we are not decentralizing some activities which we can, which is not required the urban environment essentially. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again to Dr. Ramchandran also. Previous discussion was really enriching. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Das. Sir, I will take a few more set of questions from Professor Bharati. Sure. And then, sir, then we will, then you can jointly address. Then we will have two more discussions. Professor Bharat, sir, are you?
Hello.
Yes. Let me introduce Professor Bharat Singh, Professor Bharat Singh is Associate Professor at Department of Economics at Satyavati College, University of Delhi, Delhi. Sir, kindly try to be brief.
A very good afternoon to Dr. M. Ramachandran sir, the chair of today's session, Professor R.V. Bhagat sir, Madam Professor Bhaspati Das, Dr. Arjun Kumar, Mrs. Vidya Yadav, and Dr. Kunal Kesar, and other esteemed participants in today's webinar or the special lecture as delivered by Professor R.V. Bhagat. We are really very thankful and we feel enlightened by several important concepts that has been given by Professor Bhagat, like distinction between migration and the migrants, and what we could gather that migration is a process and migrants are the subjects. If I am somewhere misplaced, Professor Bhagat will enlighten it once again. And then he spoke about two types of migrants, the voluntary migrants and the forced migrants. Here I would like to say one thing, that so far as voluntary migrants are concerned, can we categorize further into the, so far as the factors are concerned, the push factor and the pull factor responsible for migration. So which of these two factors are supposed to be more dominant, especially in case of Indian migration? ये एक point है जहाँ पे I would like to hear from Professor Bhagat. Another is the distressed migration that has been discussed already, and as you just now highlighted, that larger portion of migration in the city is the voluntary migration. But again, voluntary migration, why voluntary migration is taking place at all? Is it due to some defective process of economic development, or is it due to the glaring inequality of income and wealth that is persisting in India, all over India? Or is it a case of regional disparity also? So I would like to hear from you very briefly on this aspect also. Then it may be a further matter of further research as to what is the percentage of migrants having their permanent addresses, and how long does it take to get them acknowledged as permanent residents, especially having place of having a pakka makan in the city of their work. These are the two important points that I would like to hear from you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Professor Bhagat sir, if you like to.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Yes, sir.
So I think good comments by both discussants, and Professor Bhaspati Das has raised a few issues. This resource sharing, water, I think very critical element, and where that higher level of authority, higher level of government should pitch in, and some planning should be done. So when we are talking about water used by Delhi or water used by farmers in Haryana and Punjab, if you look at how the water is used in Haryana and Punjab, is rice cultivation suitable for Haryana and Punjab? Everybody will say not suitable. In the month of May, farmers of Punjab and Haryana, when there is no rainfall, water is pumped out from the underground and rice is cultivated. Same thing is happening in Marathwada. Marathwada is a semi-arid area, but if you see sugar cultivation, a lot of sugar mills are there. Water scarce area is doing this water irrigation, a lot of water is misused. So these are the issues, I think, at a high level one needs to sort out. And it's regarding education. Education should be separated from the city. Now, education is very important element. And inclusive city means inclusiveness of education also, inclusive of health also. And this inclusiveness should be integrated. Let me give you an example. JNU has a complete residential facility, but Delhi University doesn't have. But the question is whether the providing hostel facility or accommodation, is it the responsibility of only Delhi University, or it is the responsibility of city government or the city as such? Accommodation, rental accommodation should be provided to migrant students, not within the city, not within the university, but outside the university. But what is happening now? Our students are becoming paying guests. They are 4 or 5 students together living in one room. What they are going to study? You know what is happening in Munirka? What has happened? We all have experienced and seen. So these are larger question of housing and education. Education cannot be separated from housing. Housing cannot be separated from health. And this integration of housing, health, and education, inclusive city, I think if you take out education, that will not be, I think, make the part of the city. That is not the idea of the city. City, actually, what is city? City is a form and city is a process. What we are always trapped, or sometimes we are not clear about city as a form and city as a process. City, when I say city as a process means we need certain amenities of education, amenities of health, housing, so that our productivity can increase. So city means urbanization, and urbanization means access to amenities. And therefore, this is the process. Whether amenities you are getting at the city or in your village, doesn't matter. If these are there in the village can be called urban. So, but then form, we are trapped in the form. And forms are again administratively decided. Where the boundary of Mumbai ends, or where the boundary of Delhi ends. Within Delhi, you find several municipal corporations. But in Mumbai, there is only one municipal corporation. City is, form can be decided administratively. One can say that where in IIPS is there, Govandi can be a city. Or any part can be city. It is administratively decided. It is the form. It doesn't matter. It is a issue of urban reforms. It is an issue of political reforms. But what matters is that whether urbanization as a right, as a access, as a factor which can provide access to amenities, that is, I think, important. So this is about my response to Professor Das. And Professor Bharat Singh has raised very important point, whether we can push and pull. See, this has become a type of very important thinking, that where push factor is thought to be very important in Indian context. And politicians are in the rural context, it is the word for migration is palayan. And politician doesn't want to accept palayan. So they say, no, there is no palayan from our area. Or Uttarakhand government has created palayan commission. Now this palayan is something, yes, happening. People are coming to urban area. We have to see that not only job scarcity, there is unemployed youth. Also, there is a lot of wage gap between rural and urban area. It is very difficult to earn 3,000 rupees, 100 rupees per day in rural area. Even farming sector is going to loss. Farmers are not able to get, if 3,000 per month, 36,000 per year, they are not going to get. But here 10,000 rupees, that is 300 to 400 rupees per day in urban area is remunerative. So these urban-rural gaps are there in wages, scarcity, and that's why I think rural development is very, very necessary, and providing job opportunity, not only job or income, raising income also, and non-farm job for the farmers. So this is to what extent push factor works. I think when we go to the mechanism of migration, migration takes place through certain networks of friends, networks of family, villagers, ethnic group, caste group, there is a network. And migration is mostly product of agency. Those who are active, those who are showing some sort of agency, they are actually searching, can I get job? Otherwise, people will be sitting in the rural area, putting hands together, and then, so one has to see these pull factors are operating, but pull factors are not able to pull everybody. Now, distress migration is something coming, but distress migration, when it comes into actualize the process of migration, many distressed people are not able to migrate. Many who are poorest of the poor, they don't get opportunity to migrate because migration itself requires some sort of agency. So there are many more people who are left, who are distressed. Actually, they are left in the village. So they are suffering. So therefore, this amenity is right to the city. Urbanization should reach, planned urbanization should reach to the.
Thank you so much, sir.
One very quick one. Permanent residence is very difficult. Those who are long-term migrant earning good salary can buy house. Even getting rental house is very, very costly. So migrants live where they live. They hire one, they rent on one room, and then 5, 6, 7 together they live. So residency becomes, inclusion becomes very, very difficult thing. And residential proof becomes very, very difficult thing. And where the rental housing, cheap housing, affordable housing, all these matters a lot for urban planning, inclusion in the city, and right to the city. Okay, thank you, Arjun.
Thank you, sir. We have 2 more sets of questions. I would urge to try to be brief because many questions must have been repeated. Next, Dr. Kunal Keshri, sir.
Am I audible?
If you are audible, let me introduce you.
Okay, thank you, sir. This is Kunal Keshri from, you please introduce.
Dr. Kunal Keshri, sir, is Assistant Professor, GB Pant Social Science Institute at Prayagraj or Allahabad. Yes, sir, please.
Yeah. First, I would like to thank Dr. Arjun Kumar, Director of IMPRI, to Yadav, to say good afternoon to Chief Guest, Professor Bhagat, R.B. Bhagat. He is my PhD supervisor and I am still working with him and learning many things from him. Professor Bhaswati Das, our senior professor from JNU, and Professor Ram and Vidya Yadav, Professor Bharat Singh, and all the people who are listening to this lecture. I generally discuss with Professor Bhagat and our colleagues in our small group of urbanization and migration WhatsApp group that why government agencies has no idea about the migrants before 15th March. What were their actual database? They have really no idea about the number of migrants, how many migrants are there in Mumbai, and if you do a lockdown kind of thing, how many will leave there from there. So these issues have been raised by Professor Bhagat, and like academicians like me and other migration researchers, but still government agencies have no idea about this thing. I think mainly due to the unavailability of government data itself. Neither census data nor NSS data has been released till date. And even whatever micro level research data we have, that is not generalizable at the India. So many things are still not known to us. And whatever we can get from this kind of webinars and discussions, that migrants' right to the city is the very important issue which Professor Bhagat raised. I just want to ask 2 things. Whether, as Professor Bhagat told, that city needs to have certain amenities. So can't these amenities be provided in rural areas like health and education? Sir, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kunal sir. Now I quickly invite Vidya Yadav. Vidya Yadav ma'am is assistant professor at Patliputra University, Patna. Ma'am, please try to be brief in interest of
Yeah.
time.
Is I'm audible to everyone?
Yes.
Yeah. Good evening to all. This was a very good talk on the topic right to city. And I would like to say that Bhagat sir has rightly said about there is a kind of gap of data with the migration data for the industrial classification. Many researchers like us, we are not able to do proper research because of the unavailability of the data. I'd like to say that in Right to City challenges, basically this floating population, I mean to see the rural urban. We couldn't have any, and the temporary migrants also included in this. And the temporary migrants proved to be more vulnerable because we generally overlook the statistical data on this urban poverty. And secondly, is there any kind of, this is a question to Dr. Ramchandran sir also and to Professor Bhagat also, that is there any proper demographic definition or something like that for the rural urban, because it is just an intermingle situation between the rural and urban area, and generally it is a floating population, and basically it has been always been neglected part of the city and the village too. So, and my third, it's not a query, it's just advice. I mean, it's just my thought on this topic. Basically, when we are talking about migrants and migration, then the migrant women face a very specific constraint when it comes to accessing the urban space and other urban resources, like women as a single group. Many studies have shown that young women, basically, or a poor woman, a woman of a particular religious group and minority group, especially they face many kind of problem. And how this can be minimized, or how they will be very helpful by not getting vulnerable. So this is my query. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kunal sir and Vidya ma'am, for highlighting these issues, very important issues. I would just add a couple of more lines, and then I will invite Bhagat sir and also our chair to respond. There has been, in the part of data, we all know that the system has also produced data. In fact, the economic survey is saying that the migrant population is around 8 crores, last economic survey. Now we have estimated that 2.5 crore people have returned, vis-a-vis many estimate who are saying that there are 2 crores or 5 crores, or varying estimates. And so sir can shed some light on that, how this can be done. More so now in this quest of Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana package and also Atmanirbhar package, one more thing has been introduced, known as NMIS, National Migrant Information System, which will record this data and changes in labor codes and so many new things happening. And how this MIS data is being produced, what use it can be, and as Dr. Ramachandran is suggesting, that area sabha or local governance or the small settlements, is it going bottom up or top down? What data are we creating? Is it of any use? Because data we are creating, even the government is creating data. Let us forget about NSS and census, because we don't give any benefit from those databases. From SECC we did give, but these dynamic databases, what are the processes of exclusion here? What are the threats, and can it be decentralized so that from the production level itself, it is also being used by the area sabha, or as Dr. Ramachandran and also our speaker suggested, that is also locally used for acting upon, especially in this pandemic time. So this was one more thing I wanted to add. Next question is related to place and space. What are we doing with our informal spaces? In Delhi, we just passed this, the right to property rights in unauthorized colony. Nothing is happening on the ground. that is required to almost all the cities, more so in every Eastern Indian cities, at least UP, Bihar. So how are we going in terms of right of the land or the house or the space within the city itself? And how these characteristics are evolving, and also linked with this point is the ARHC, affordable rental housing complexes. This has been in substance so long. I also have a special article in EPW on rental housing, and we had did several studies for Delhi government, also drafted a rental housing policy. And the point which Vidya ma'am used, we also did survey and study of, there are many hostels being set up, only construction done, no beneficiaries are using. Just imagine in Delhi, we have so many of buildings constructed, everything is good, but our system is not enabling people to use it, especially for, let us say, girls. There are contestations from people from Northeast, or from I coming from Bihar and Jharkhand, so my name is Bihari here, or someone says me Ranchi. So these issues also come, and in terms of the capital creation and the money, and this bubble of rental housing, vacant housing, and DSIIDC in Delhi itself have more than 35,000 flats being made, and those are vacant from last 10 years. And then there is what is the tenure for which you give these people rent, and then there is police verification and a different kind of exclusion. These issues, I will not take much time, sir. Please try to be brief. We'll just extend our session to 10 more minutes, and then chair can also suggest for a few important remarks. Yes, sir, please.
Hello. So should I say?
Yes, please, sir.
Achha. So Kunal raised the important point, and this is, I think, a concern, how to provide health and education to rural area. So I think first we must have convergence of all planning, all programs, and we must revive the culture of planning. So to begin with, how to revamp rural development under the government programs, there should be convergence. So as chair has also remarked earlier, we are working in the silos, and that is, I think, very, very challenging. Then it has to be upscaled. It is not single village or single panchayat, but urban complex. A group of villages together with a nucleus of a town, which can be Mandi town or which can be market town, and surrounding villages to be linked. And we have to create some sort of urban complexes, rural urban complexes, where connectivity should be provided. Connectivity, educational connectivity, health, because it is not possible to provide for every village, but certain services can be provided for a complex. So connectivity, educational connectivity, electronic connectivity, internet becoming very important. Transportation. Transportation doesn't mean only building road. Now government thinks that build the road, then there is a transportation. If roads are there and buses are not there, what is the use of road? So that's the connectivity. Transportation connectivity. Now farmers are not able to sell the product. They are always looking after the government, that the government will buy the products at remunerative price, because market is not available. So this, I think, some sort of rural urban complexes. First is there should be convergence at a village level, there should be planning. Manrega is being done without plan. You dig out somewhere and fill somewhere because there is no plan. So there is no asset creation. So I think planning and this urbanization, planned urban development, there are concepts, there are ideas, right from third 5-year plan ideas were there. But somewhere it goes into the backseat, then it resurfaces. So all these things are right. Data invisibility is a politics, some sort of urban politics. You can say this is neoliberalism and this politics of capital accumulation, where that migrant worker has not come into the scene, is not recognized, they are insignificant. So where They are invisible in data also. So we have to bring statistical inclusion. And statistical inclusion means they should be visible in the data, in the NSSO data, in the census data, or at a data which is compiled from the local level to aggregated at a district level to the state level. All these, I think these are some of the things, issues, challenges. A lot of things. So then Vidya has asked about how to demarcate between that urban area. It is a semi-urban. It depends. It's an empirical question. How you demarcate doesn't matter. But thing is that urbanization is a process. What we have to understand that these are, we are talking about urban, rural, all these are category, empirical category. What is the fundamental in urbanization is that urbanization is access to higher level of human development indicators. And that is education, health, and transportation facility, which can bring out the potential of people, not only as a human resources, but human development can take place. So urbanization is good in that sense. It unfolds creativity, and then it brings together people. Without bringing to people, it is not possible. So urbanization says, yes, let us have people, diversity, diverse type of people, and diverse type of people interacting and innovating. And that can be possible through education. That can be possible through transportation, mobility. So this is what is there. The urbanization as a process one should see. And the forms are empirical question. It is open to researcher. I can do in your way, or you can do your way. Government will accept some of the things and implement. It is up to the government which model they prefer, and they will take up and then implement. So this is what. And then Arjun's question, yes, about data, same thing. I think Home Minister has already replied in some channel that there are 12 million people who return to villages by train and buses. 12 million. There are many people who return by foot, by cycle. So you are right, there may be 25 to 30 million, 3 crore people who have returned. And migrant workers, yes, rightly, it is coming about 80 million, something like that. But these migrants are temporary migrants. In that, we are not included. I am a migrant, you are a migrant, you are not included. We are long-term migrants. So the temporary migrant who are circulating migrant, who are not included in urban spaces, those migrants are something 80 million, and those are vulnerable. They need social security protection and inclusion. So this is what, and including rental and etc. Labor reforms. Already there is, we have labor laws are not implemented. What labor reforms we are talking? See, labor reforms, land reforms, we are talking about always. This is not the question, important question. Important question is how to create demand in the economy, how the rural youth can get job. But our policy priorities are misplaced. Some of the think tank, they sometimes divert. I'm sorry to say this, that yes, there is a problem of labor reform. There is a problem of land. We have passed land acquisition bill. 2 times Parliament has passed. Then also there is a land problem. See, land problem will remain because India is a country of small farmers, very attached to land. Nobody wants to give land. But
Sir, I think we lost you somewhere in between.
I think
Yeah,
some
it is
technical
not
issues.
audible.
Mhm.
I think network will be slow.
Yes, it's not coming.
Okay. Meanwhile, I will.
So factory-based manufacturing has gone away. We have more service sector and more financial sector, more other sectors, MSME sectors are there, which do not require much land. So land reforms, labor reform, I think these are not important issue. Important issue is how to create demand in the economy, how to give job to the unemployed people. So I think I will stop here. I hope I have replied, but everybody has a reply. It is not that you don't have your thinking. And it is not necessary that my thinking is the final thinking. It is interaction between you and me that comes out something that one can have, one can follow later on.
Thank you so much, sir, for so much patiently answering to so many queries. Now I will quickly invite our chair to respond and moreover reflect upon so many pertinent questions which has been highlighted, and also some question posed to sir. We also have some in chat group suggestions coming and comments that the similar situation is in Nepal, and it is rightly so for all the developing regions. Chair sir, please also reflect upon this question that the new dynamic database which we are creating, how area sabhas can be integrated there, and that is made a practice, especially to fight this coronavirus pandemic. Sir, please.
Thank you. I don't know whether I should try to respond to too many points. That's basically the prerogative of the key speaker. But just one point which Dr. Vidya raised about the whether do we have data about this urban population, if I got it right. The problem is, one is for good governance, good planning, we need to have reliable data. And I think Professor Bhagat already touched upon that subject. Even some of the survey outcomes are not published, which is not available. I can cite any number of instances. When I was in the urban ministry, we were talking about projects for the water sector to reduce non-revenue water, to put account for water and things like that. But when someone goes to a city to structure a project for that city, the basic problem which the project developers faced was that data was not available at the city level. And this is a constant continuing problem. And as far as migrants are concerned, I think that itself is the problem. We don't have data. I don't know whether we'll succeed in generating data because, as I said, it could involve certain privacy issues and things like that. X may be working with this construction company for 10 days, then he or she may be moving on to another one. So whether one would want to divulge that type of information that I'm here today, I'm with so-and-so tomorrow, and even the employer may not want to part with information because then he or she is bound by certain regulations, payments and things like that. So it's a vicious circle. I don't see that happening very quickly. But I was trying to advocate this idea about the generation of information and data at the area level, which is a polling station level, so that there is more homogeneity among people living at in that particular area, which could probably become a good input into the decision making for the city as a whole, if we can try to develop that. We have been talking about all these things. I should also mention, today, if you ask the Central Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs as to how many urban local bodies do we have in the country, they may not be able to give an answer as of today. They will rely on some data which is available some months back. That is because creation of a local body is a subject of the state governments, as you all know. Now, some state governments create, some state governments merge some of these into. There is no automatic mechanism whereby when that happens, that get registered in a data profile somewhere at the central level, and it can be immediately accessed. So the central ministry depends on the states every time to report to them as to what is the number of urban local bodies which you have, which could mean municipal corporations, municipal councils, town areas and the like. In the state also, if you go to a state like UP, I mean, I worked there. If you ask the director of local bodies, what is the number of local bodies as of today and what is the population classification, class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, he may not immediately be able to give a reply. So the relevance of data and the importance of capturing data to be at the base of all decision making. Unfortunately, that culture really has not come about. Sometimes what happens is at the end of the year, some sort of handbook is produced in which some data as on say 30th September will be included in the data which is published in April or May next. So there is something terribly lacking as far as our consciousness about having updated data for our process is concerned. That has to change, and that is what is critical. So I'm not very sure in the case of cities also whether this data will be available or not, or whether people would want to part with data. But some sort of linking of the Aadhaar number, like we have the now one nation, one ration card principle and things like that, whether some of those can converge somewhere and some sort of data can become available as far as the city is concerned without damaging the cause of those who are involved in the process. Also, it's a question of how people can partake in this process. In the beginning, I referred to this example of in Surat, I believe people got together to provide food to the migrant laborers who had assembled and who were demonstrating. But it was not food they were looking for at that particular moment. At that particular moment, their concern was to get back to their villages, be with their families. And in that, I would think to a certain extent, states failed because states should have judged this, that these people would want to go back and there is no point in asking them to hold on. And states should have prevailed over the central government in facilitating trains when the center suddenly decided. Because these are all based on feedback, because the center on its own cannot be foreseeing anything and everything. So if that pressure had come from the states, probably for a couple of days trains would have done and these people would have got back in proper condition rather than walking and some unfortunately dying in the process. So governance is a complex process. I think that is the ultimate I can say without taking even more time. Ultimately, we are governed by the people whom we elect. So they represent the wisdom at that point in time. So that's why we keep changing governments also. When we are not happy with certain scheme of things, we change our governments. So governance to be more or less a perfect system, I think it will take time. And as Professor Bhagat rightly mentioned, sometimes we ourselves forget that most of us are migrants into the city. We come from somewhere, we work here, so we are migrants, but we are not treated as migrants. Probably more so because we more actively partake in the process of cities' growth and development, and we give an impression that we are part of that process. Whereas these people who run from place to place, who look for a particular day's labor, I'm sure those who are living in Delhi would have seen there is in that Kotla area, you will see workers waiting in the morning for someone to come and pick them up for mason's work or whatever it is. Now that type of a person, where can his or her data enter? Because today he is waiting for someone to give him an opportunity and he may be going there and working for, I don't know, 1 day, 3 days, 5 days or so. So he'll be moving from place to place. So unless we develop systems, it's easy to criticize the system, but we also have to contribute to the process of developing systems. And there has to be an understanding between the government per se and those who are wanting to facilitate the better things in the society as a whole. Unless that comes about, this won't be there. I don't think I should be taking any more time. Enough has been said by Professor Bhagat in a very, very eminent manner. He has covered the whole gamut of issues related to this. And I'm sure none of us have a final answer as to whether where the migrant stands and what improvements can be brought about as far as the migrants are concerned. But as he rightly stressed, there is some thought given to it that the migrants have to be taken note of, and at least in the coming days, they should feel better being part of the city in whichever form it is. There are any number of other questions. Where do they live? Where do they, if they are with family, where do they send their children for education? If they have to move from place to place. Transportation is a huge expenditure for people like this if they are working at distant places. Some of these families have to spend, you all know, something like 1/4 or 1/3 of their income on transportation alone. In cities like Delhi, I mean, we all engage people, but we don't really know where they are coming from because there is no place. That's why the slums come up. Someone asked a question whether we can do away with slums. Ideally, that's what one would like to, but I don't think that will happen unless we have policies where all these people get some form of housing. And if we can have a zero growth city, I don't think we are going to have zero growth cities as long as this development process is going on. So people will come, people will look for opportunities. We will want to engage people for different activities. So that process will go on for some time. Hopefully, when we reach a certain stage, probably they'll also be better taken care of. There may not be so much movement for moving into cities. I think, Dr. Arjun, I should stop at this without continuing. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir, for very nicely highlighting one very important part, which is often missing in the narrative. All the events we do on urbanization, we put the title inclusive and sustainable cities or inclusive and sustainable urbanization. The basic learning from today's lecture is that we have to move beyond inclusive and sustainable narrative also to balanced city, the balanced form of urbanization from the historical and the process, forms, characteristic, everything highlighted from so much of plethora of knowledge. Our speaker, Professor Bhagat, and our chair from the vast experience in administration has suggested. So this balanced development is also the key in this question of space, movement, mobility. I thank all of you, and if we can just have the slides, Ritika. Yes, these are some of the studies I just quickly, and many of our speakers here were earlier part of this. This can be very useful for students and researchers. These studies we have done, also many studies before also, those are there in the videos, and also many media papers and reports which have brought. So this is a study on impact of lockdown 3.0 on city makers. This is one event which everyone can see. And yeah, next event. Yes, this was the next event where also Dr. Ramachandran sir and Professor Bhagat also reflected upon the experiences which we collected from more than 50 cities across India. Next. And also the cities edition, what is happening in Delhi city. This we have tried to capture, and this is again a panel discussion in Tamil Nadu perspective. Southern cities also we have tried to capture. These are very informative, very distinguished people speaking and highlighting these issues. So we think also to, and this is a study again on those who have returned from cities. So city makers who have returned to their villages. This was in the context of a hilly region, Uttarakhand, and what have been their experiences. And then now we are in this perspective also looking to today's lecture. And I thank all of you from bottom of my heart, and from on behalf of my institution, Impact and Policy Research Institute, and all of you who has come here and touched upon this very important issue. Now I'll invite Anshula to formally give vote of thanks, and then we can conclude. Bhagat sir, you want to say any final word?
No, thank you very much, and particularly Dr. Ramachandran. I think his comments and insights are very helpful, personally to me and to the participants. I hope so. And we have to think, I think it is a continuous process to raise the consciousness, our consciousness, how cities act in the process of our development. We should not marginalize city, and city and migrants should be seen together. So that's all, I think. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir. Anshula, if you can be quick. Mike.
On behalf of the Center for Work and Welfare at the Impact and Policy Research Institute, I would like to thank all our panelists and attendees for participating today. I would like to begin by thanking our chair for today, Dr. M. Ramachandran, for agreeing to chair the session, for taking out the time for this, and for setting the stage for today's lecture by raising some very pertinent questions on what kind of harsh implications the sudden lockdown had on migrants, and how migrants feature in economics and politics. How are they treated by others? What's the kind of relief and recourse that is available for them in such a time? And how the informal sector functions, what is the nature of skill of the migrants and how it can be put to better use. And further, so you also raised the question of whether it is an issue of our mindset itself that has somehow ignored migrants as a separate section, and whether the availability of data will make a difference in the planning of the city. Thank you for that, sir. Then I would, of course, like to thank our distinguished speaker for today, Professor R.V. Bhagat, for such an insightful, enthralling, and thought-provoking lecture. So you highlighted how it is necessary to distinguish between migration and migrants, because while migration is an inalienable right, there are policy making implications for migrants. So that needs to be kept in mind. And you went on to explain how cities have changed from being a place having connections with people to a space which is being produced as a commodity and as a built environment. And we have sort of evolved with a disconnect in that evolution. So from that, you went on to talk about the right of the city and how inclusivity and sustainability of cities should be paramount. And for that, and to restore the city to the people, the local democracy has to be strengthened. And you ended on the note of how can urbanization be helpful for rural development, and how we can move from the rural-urban divide to an integrated rural-urban development, and how we need a planned urbanization where space and place feature in policy making. So thank you for that, sir. Thank you for taking out the time for the lecture today. I would also like to thank our discussants, Professor Bhaswati Das, who spoke of the interconnectedness of activities between different cities and urban centers, and how the right of the village would also need to be recognized along with the right of the city. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Professor Bharat Singh. You raised the issue of how push and pull factors might vary in voluntary migration. You talked of distress migration and how long it would take to get permanent residence for migrants. Thank you, sir. Dr. Kunal Keshri, you spoke of how many things are not known at the micro level, and raised the question of whether amenities that are being spoken of for urban areas can also be provided in rural areas, such as health and education. Thank you, sir. And thank you to Mrs. Vidya Yadav. You discussed the issue in terms of floating population, talked of the rural population, and also highlighted that migrant women face a specific constraint in accessing urban spaces and resources. Thank you to all of you for taking part in it. And I would like to thank Dr. Arjun Kumar for moderating the session and coordinating it, and Ritika Gupta for managing the webinar so smoothly. Thank you.
Anshula, if you can quickly take a screenshot of everyone for a record, if everyone can have their camera on.
Just a moment. Yes. Thank you.
Then thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
And have a nice day.
Thank you.
Nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.